Hello and welcome to the Jump Show. They've somehow managed to rope me in here. I assure you, I came kicking and screaming. We have the usual suspects in Dan and Jake. Jake, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Looking forward to getting stuck into some really good action at Aintree, unlike yourself.
On your own, son. And Dan, how are you doing?
It might be the first time a host of a show and also the guy who owns the channel has claimed he's doing this against his own will.
Yeah.
Everyone can just feel the passion radiating from you. Like everyone's now in the mood, they're ready for Aintree, and Willow's like, yeah, you might as well be holding up a sign saying, I'm being held hostage, please pay the ransom money. So yeah, Aintree, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm not fully in the mood, but I'm sure after speaking to you boys for a little bit, I'll be enjoying the jump season all over again.
That's highly debatable.
Yeah, very debatable. All right, we'll kick things off with the Betway Bowl. This race pits the 2019 and 2021 winners against each other. That's Clandazabo and Kemboy. But we do also have two of the horses running the Gold Cup, the third and fifth, in Protectorat and Royal Pagaille. I think this is a proper race, if I'm honest with you, Jake, and I'll head over to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm not really looking at the horses that have run in the race before, to be honest. Clandazabo was not a big fan of his run last time at all. I think Dan will touch on that more, but yeah, just doesn't look like he's with the game. Then you've got Kemboy as well. I think he's much of a muchness. I think he ran well at Leopardstown. But it's just, is he going to be stepping up to win a race like this? Now he's a 10-year-old, probably not. So I was looking at more Protectorat and Conflated, to be honest, as the two that I like were looking at for the race. I haven't really nailed down one yet, but I did think Protectorat had quite a hard race in the Gold Cup. I know it was slowly run, but you had to work hard to take third. So I think he may have had a hard race. We'll see, obviously, how these horses come out at Cheltenham. But Conflated, I thought he was probably the one that I'm leaning towards, especially with the prices, I guess. I think he ran really well in the Irish Gold Cup over 3 miles. Went back for the Ryanair, which was a debatable move. Obviously, the connections had Galvin and stuff in the race, so they chucked him in the Ryanair. And he was going to come through and stay on for second, but I don't think there was ever a point where he was going to challenge Allaho, like some people seem to think. But yeah, I thought that stepping back up to 3 miles on a flat track, I thought Conflated probably is the one. But yeah, shout for Protectorat as well.
I'll head over to you, Dan. Jake sort of alluded that you weren't a fan of Clandazobo's run at Newbury, and he looks like one you're going to be taking on despite being joint favourite. So who's it for you?
Yeah, I say it just didn't look right last time. It didn't look his usual self. He didn't travel with any kind of zest. His jumping was average, and they've reached for the first time blinkers here, which clearly suggests that they thought likewise of his last run. And considering he's favourites on a good few books, I'm happy to look elsewhere. So Kemboy, this is his kind of test in his track, I'd say. I mean, he had a spectacular performance here not too long ago, but again, he hasn't exactly been pulling up trees this season. He's been running okay, but he probably isn't quite the force of old. So for me, I do like Protectorat here. I think for all that he had a bit of a race in the Gold Cup, it was a slowly run race, and it was only his third start of the season. Obviously, different horses react differently to coming out again, but in such a short time. But I think there's reason enough to kind of overlook that with him. And also, I think 6 of the past 7 winners of this race ran in the Gold Cup on their last run. So it's not exactly an unharrowed step to winning this race. It's to run in the Gold Cup. So that wouldn't really concern me. And he probably would have had second that day as well if he didn't make a blunder at the last. So I thought that was a very creditable run from a young progressive horse. And he's 2 from 2 at Aintree as well. So there's a lot to like about his profile. And in this occurrence, I will go with the younger, more progressive horse.
Yeah, no, I had it between 2 myself. The first was Protectorat, basically for similar reasons as yourself. He acts particularly well around Aintree. The concerns you would have is if the run comes too quickly, but this is a fairly light campaign. He did have a 100-day break. And if the rain that we are forecasted to get does come, then that's going to be in his favour. And the other horse that it's a bit of a price thing, really, and that's Eldorado Allen for the Tizzards. I think he should definitely be a shorter price than Clandazobo. He battered him 12 lengths at Newbury. He's still fairly unexposed at the trip as well. I think he's about 6-1, so he could be like a muggy little each way play to nothing. We'll move on to the Aintree Hurdle. That's going to be next on our list. If I'm perfectly honest with you, uninspiring stuff from this. The current market leader's Epatton. I don't think she's going to stay 2.5 miles as much as I love her. I would fancy Zanna here for this, but I'm sort of reluctant to back him as he's ran plenty of times this season, had a lot of hard races. Dan, shed some light on the Aintree Hurdle for us.
I never thought I'd hear the day that in any race where I'd say, yeah, Batan's running, I don't really like her. It's almost
it's
the
a sorry
betrayal
sight,
here.
isn't it?
It's sad, as for as long as I've known you, this has been your horse forever. Like this is your golden girl, and you're turning your back on her after arguably a career best run as well, which makes it even more incredible. I say, we were discussing this before we came on about going up to 2.5 and what are they thinking, and to be honest, I think it's a good move with a view to the long term, because she's been running at 2 miles forever. You might as well give these things a go once every so often, and this isn't exactly a vintage race. I mean, Zanahiyr, I think they're joint favourites, aren't they? Zanahiyr and Epatante. He's solid enough, but I mean, he's had a hard enough season. Epatante was ahead of him last time out, and for all that you'd think which one would prefer 2.5 more, it would be Zanahiyr. He's not exactly bomb-proof, this horse. He's been beaten enough times. He's not proper grade 1 stuff, and he's short enough. And 5-year-olds' record in this race, for all that we think last year's juveniles were a decent crop, isn't exactly inspiring. I think they're 0 from 9 in the last decade. And I think Zarkanda fell in this race, Newham was second, and then they came back and won it next year. So perhaps it's a year too soon for Zanahiyr. And to be honest, the more I looked at it, and the more from a tactical perspective as well, there are no real strong pace angles in here. I actually warmed to Epatante, because I think a solid run 2.5, a track like Aintree, might just suit her, and she might get away with it. Look, her half sister won over intermediate distances, and admittedly, Epatante's never been crying out to be stepped up in trip. But in a race like this, like you get this caliber opposition with not much pace on, she might just have an extra gear that the others don't have when the race begins to develop. And considering she is coming here on the back of a spectacular effort in the Champion Hurdle, and she would have got closer to Honeysuckle if not for dragging her back legs through that last flight. I think if forced, I think I'd go with her, but this isn't a big punting race for me.
You've twisted my arm, Dan. I'll be going in once again on Epatante. Jake, you have differing opinions on Zanahiyr, don't you? You quite fancy him to win this.
Yeah, I do. You've changed your tune quite quickly there, just after one argument.
Didn't take much.
He's easily swayed. Easily swayed.
I just followed down, that's all.
Yeah, that doesn't exactly go well very often, but hey.
So for me, it's a lot of it is boiling down to the fact that Nikki Henderson came out after Cheltenham and said that they discussed going for the Aintree race and then decided that 2.5 miles is not for her because she doesn't want 2.5 miles because she's all about speed. I think that's what's really hitting home. I definitely agree that it's worth giving it a go, because obviously the Mares Hurdle becomes an option then next season if she does end up staying the trip. So I don't blame them for going for it. It's just when your trainer's coming out and saying that you don't want a trip that they're going to then run you over, it just doesn't make sense to me. Whereas Zanahiyr, conversely, obviously, as Dan mentioned, is the horse that should be suited to stepping up in trip. Last year, obviously, Abracadabras was a similar type in terms of he was a decent 2-miler, but stepping up in trip, he was much better over 2.5, and he won the Aintree Hurdle quite well, and it was a decent renewal, obviously, with Buzz in second. But yeah, Zanahiyr, I think stepping up a trip, he's ran well in grade 1s all season. For a 4-year-old, he's really done, overachieved for his age category in open company grade 1 races. And I know a lot of people were saying right at the beginning of the season that he's an out-and-out stayer, he needs further. But I think it was sensible to keep him over 2 miles. He's run some nice races, as I've said. And yeah, I think now is the time to go up to 2.5 at Aintree on a nice, easy track. He's going to be wearing the pieces. I'd imagine that Jack Kennedy will take him forward. If there's no pace, he'll probably end up making it like he did earlier on in the season in a couple of races. I just think he's really solid. I think he's going to want the step on trip. Gordon's already talking about the Stayers Hurdle for him next season. So you can see, what type of angle they're going for him. And I just think if Epatante doesn't stay, then there's nothing left in the race for me that would trouble Zanahiyr at all. You've got Bruin up a Storm. It's probably the next best. And that's just not cutting it for me in a grade 1. So yeah, I'm all over Zanahiyr here. As much as I do respect Epatante, I just can't get those trainer comments out of my head.
I will just chuck the name of Monmoral out there. I loved him as a juvenile. It was on this at this meeting last year where he won really well. Things haven't gone right from this year. He picked up an injury in the fighting fifth, and I watched back his last run. I know he was beaten comprehensively by both Bruin up a Storm and Botox House, but he travelled really well, and that was off a layoff. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he came on a lot for that run. 2.5 should suit. And again, if the ground was to turn up soft, that'll definitely be in his favour. If not this year, then definitely next year. He must be a chaser in the making. But yeah, Monmoral, one to keep an eye on. I think he'll run a good race. I'm going to open this up to the pair of you for anything else on the Thursday segment, and I'll go back to you, Jake.
Yeah, sure. So the first one I've got is in the Red Rum, and I quite like Before Midnight. So he absolutely bolted up at Cheltenham in October off a mark of 136, and then he even went and won at Ascot on his next start of 144. So he's clearly a progressive 2-mile chaser. For all that he's a 9-year-old now, he's quite lightly raced and still unexposed in my opinion. Last time he ran off a mark of 148 at Doncaster, and that day he was only a length behind Funambo Sabola, who is round rated 163, having finished second in the Champion Chase. Obviously, he inherited second due to what happened in the Champion Chase, but he's still a very solid horse, and he's going to be running in the Marsh, which we'll talk about later. So I think he's very feasibly handicapped off a mark of 148 because he was left alone on that mark, despite what the winner's done. He was supposed to run in at Cheltenham in the Grand Annual. Obviously, that just got decimated with non-runners due to the heavy ground. So I'm glad that he skipped that. And I think, a good ground, flat track, I think that will really see the best of Before Midnight. So he's won. And in the mare's bumper, I've actually picked out one here, and that's Rosie Redrum for Milton Harris. She absolutely bolted up at Wincanton. She only won by a length, but she cruised into the race despite being fairly keen in the rear. She then went and finished second behind Top Dog in the listed race at Newbury in February. And that was a really good effort because she gave away ground at the start and still came all the way through the field and was only beaten about a length and a half. So that was 2 really good runs. She's rated 118, which is obviously you've got to take bumper ratings with a pinch of salt. But that's the highest in the race. And because she's a 4-year-old, she gets £8 from the field. So I think she's got a really good chance for Milton Harris, who has a great strike rate in bumpers this season of 8 winners from 29 runners, so 28% strike rate. So yeah, that's 2 for my list.
I like that bumper horse. That sounds good. Dan, I'll head over to you. Any love, potentially, I wouldn't begrudge you if you didn't look at the race at all, for your old friend Porlock Bay in the Fox Hunt?
Oh, Jesus. Oh, no, I did not even look at the race. No, you can let those ships sail. I don't need to go back in there. I mean, I think he actually turned out he had like a lung problem, like an actual proper, not even just he isn't right. He had a lung infection or something of that ilk. So that's why he didn't even go to Cheltenham. So I thought he needed every yard of that trip. So back over 2 mile 5 in over these fences wouldn't be for me. I do like the Milton Harris mare in the bumper. It's just a mare's bumper at Aintree, and I wouldn't be in a rush to get massively stuck into anything. I can definitely see the case for her. Manifesto, probably the worst grade 1 you'll see all week and maybe all season. It's a dreadful little race. But I mean, I do quite like Warlord. I've liked him all season. I think he's a very likable type. He's always looked like he wanted to step up in trips sooner rather than later. And I think he's finally getting that now. Didn't quite have the gears in the Arkle on lively ground, as we know. Before the rain came, it was probably riding more on the firm side than it was the good to soft side. So no disgrace there when he ran to finish 4th. And being beaten in the Arkle hasn't exactly been prohibitive to success in this race in the past. Plenty have done it. And the Tizzards as well, for as much as they may be hit and miss, this meeting tends to be where they shine. I mean, you look at the 2016 till 2019, they had 12 winners from 40 runners. Obviously, the last year was a complete write-off. Their horses weren't right. But I think Warlord's got a very good chance in that race. And in the Red Rum, a horse I've had on my eye on for pretty much all season. I think he's been teed up for something, and that's King d'Argent. Now, this is a horse who went up £30 last year in his first season over fences. He thrived. And ever since then, he's just been up against it. He ran a cracker on his reappearance behind Nutswell. Then he was struck into in the Holden Gold Cup. And I think ever since then, they've been planning for a race in the spring. He was used to be ridden positively. He was a very accurate, aggressive jumper. And then all of a sudden, you see he's drifting in the market and he's being held up quite drastically in his races. You don't have to be a genius to figure out what's going on there. I mean, at Newbury, he went off 50-1, ridden in rear. Then he went to Doncaster on his second start, again, out the back. He ended up only 4 lengths behind Fernando Cibola. He was clearly not fancied to run well and probably did better than they almost thought he would. And again, same again last time, David England on, Riggin negatively. But again, the race just almost fell apart and he nearly won it. Like Bundoran and just pipped him on the line. And to be honest, if King d'Argent had jumped the last 2 better, he would have won that day. And again, I don't think that was the master plan for him. I thought they might go to Ayr instead of here, but I don't mind them going here at all. If they're going to revert to positive tactics, that really suits this race. He's now £7 lower than he was at the start of the season, and he was running well at the start of the season too. Like that first run was more than creditable. I think this has been a long-term plan. So King Darjon back aggressive tactics, Harry Skelton back on board, taking over from David England. I think this race will be run to suit.
Ooh, I like that. You made a really good case there. We'll move on to the Mildmay Novice Chase. Recent winners include Mike Bite, Native River, Lost in Translation. Dan, if there was to be one of those horses in this race, it's most probably going to be La Homme Press or Brave Man's Game. I'm assuming you're going to be taking the La Homme Press angle.
Well, yeah. I've been saying for too long that I think he's the best novice chaser in Britain. I can't exactly abandon him now after a very impressive performance at Cheltenham. But look, I do have doubts, and he's short enough for me not to be leaping at him again. Like I've kind of had my fun. I don't really feel need the conviction to go back in again because Brave Man's Game is going to be fresh. I think you can definitely make a case for Aintree being more of a fit for him than Cheltenham would have been. Again, that was part of the reason I was so keen on Long Press, was because of that case. And tactically as well, it's going to be interesting with the three, which we thought were going to line up at Cheltenham, how it's going to play out here. Long Press kind of had to take it from Ahoy Senor, take up the running, because he was just out jumping the latter. Now, you'd imagine Brave Man's Game will be content to track the pair, like he did at Kempton behind us, Ahoy Senor, before just taking over and coasting away. But if Long Press and Ahoy Senor get into a battle, which they could do, if Ahoy Senor jumps better, it will be an interesting development up front. It might just set things up nicely for Brave Man's Game, particularly when you consider they would have had a fairly hard race at Cheltenham. Like conditions were starting to deteriorate by then. And although I do think Long Press finished with plenty of running left, so it's a tough one. I've been going around in circles with this one for a while. Look, if I was tempted to bet and I was forced to, I'd go with Long Press because I just do think he's the better horse and he has the better finishing element to him. Like I absolutely adore him. But it's one of those where you can make the argument either way for why Brave Man's Game might be able to win here. And even Ahoy Senor isn't a foregone. He's not out of this at all because he rallied superbly well after getting out jumped in the middle part of that race at Cheltenham. So interesting race. I can't wait to watch it. And if forced, Long Press for me.
Yeah, I too found this race really difficult. If the ground was nice spring ground, I do think the track's going to suit Brave Man's Game. The fresh angles there as well. I think I'd most probably just lean towards him. And Jake, I'll head to you for your selection as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very much dependent on the ground. I think the quicker it is, the better chance Brave Man's Game has, and the softer it is, the better chance Long Press has. Unfortunately, it's not really a betting race, is it? When you've got 5-4, 11-8, the pair. Away from them, I guess Fury Road is going to be running under Jack Kennedy. He's around 12-1. I mean, if you get on the free places before the anti-post market, then that would be a decent bet potentially. But I think it's probably going to be a battle between the pair of them. And I guess on the flatter track, if it is going to be better ground, I would probably side with Brave Man's Game. But as I said, it's not really a betting race, and Long Press could easily still just be the better horse, and even on quicker ground. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for, I guess, with a view to races for next season.
We won't spend too long on the next race. It's the Marsh Chase. We have last year's winner, Fakir Dudaris, heading the market. I personally think he'll just win how he likes. He's just been unfortunate to bump into sort of Allaho and Shaq and Poursoir in his career. He's a rock solid horse. He's just going to be better than these lot. Dan, tell me he's not going to bolt up.
He's short enough though, isn't he? I mean, look, I think prohibitive price there. I mean, for all that he won last time, it wasn't exactly a vintage performance. Like that race completely fell apart. I mean, Tooth for Gold is a good little yardstick, but I don't think Fakir is out and out proper grade 1 standard. He just isn't. Like if there was a grade 1 horse in here, he wouldn't be the price he is. But again, we're in that situation where it's fairly middling of fair and a lot of doubts about a lot of these. One thing you'd say is that there are plenty of pace angles. If all that look like they're going to run, do run. And you've got Editor G, who I can't believe they're looking like stepping up to 2.5. All Mankind goes forward. Paint the Dream makes all. Mr. Fisher was making all in this race 12 months ago when he fell midway through the race. So he should get a good setup. And I just, niggling doubts about the price of him. There's no doubt that he's got a rock solid profile for the race. We discussed this on our Cheltenham show. We thought he should skip Cheltenham to come here because it will be his better chance, and he absolutely is. But looking at the stats, actually, only 2 of the 30 winners of this race ended up skipping Cheltenham. While interestingly, 20 of the 30 winners of this race ran in the Champion Chase last time out, which does just lean me slightly towards Fernando Civola at the prices. Now, I thought he advertised himself extremely well at this meeting last year. He really kind of rose to prominence when he was narrowly behind Shishkin. And he'd been doing well with novice chases before that, but this was really his like come out performance as I am a proper horse kind of feel. And he's been, again, very solid this season. Again, another great run in the Champion Chase. Yes, the race fell apart, and I'm not exactly a fan of how that developed. But when you're looking at 11 to 10 versus 11 to 2, if you forced me to have a bet, it would be Fernando Civola just at the prices.
So what Dan's basically saying is Fakir Duduris just wins. We'll head over to Jake for your selection in the Marsh.
Yeah, I tried to look for an angle quite hard, actually. I had a really good look through, and there's some really nice horses in here.
Did you not get the angle of Champion Chase runners in this race, no?
I didn't look hard enough.
I looked really hard for an angle, okay?
Yeah, I looked for 2 minutes.
I just think with Fernando Civola that I've been backing him over 2.5 before, and I'm just very suspect about him staying the trip. I know it's obviously Aintree flat track, but that would be my issue with him. But I really do think that Fakir Duduris just wins it, to be honest. I know it's boring. But last season he was up against Politolog, who came into it as his market rival. He was about 5 to 2, Politolog was. And I know obviously Politolog was on the slump, but he still came into it rated in the 160s and was, fancied to run well. And he got beaten out of sight, and Fakir Duduris bolted by 11 lengths. There's nothing in here of that ilk, in my opinion. I think it's interesting that they're stepping up Sco Royale, but now he's a 10-year-old for the first time in his whole career that they're going to go beyond 2 miles with him. Be interesting to see how he gets on, but it wouldn't be carrying my money. And yeah, I just don't think any of the rest are that good. So yeah, Fakir Duduris just wins it for me.
Brilliant. I'll head back to you, Jake, for anything else on Friday, if you have any more bets on that.
Yeah, I've got a couple. So the first one will come in the Topham, and that's going to be 5 Star Getaway. Now, 5 Star Getaway, obviously Christian Williams has proven recently how much of a target trainer he is. He won with Captain Nord at Kempton, won with Win My Wings, obviously in the Scottish National the other day. He really has spring targets for his horses lined up for a long time, and that's their target. That's final. That's what they're aiming for. But he's run some really nice races this season over 3 miles. So he went to Kempton in December after a bit of a break, and he went and beat Fortescue by a length. And Fortescue's obviously gone on to win since, and is now rated in the high 140s. So that looks like a nice piece of form. And then he went to Sandown and finished third behind Lee Milos and a couple of Deep Days Aber, who were both decent horses at Sandown. And again, it looks nice pieces of form. He ran in that Kempton race that I mentioned with Captain Nord winning. He was just like, they just gave him such an easy time when he was beaten. He ended up finishing 8th, beating about 30 lengths, but it was still, it was one of those runs where you just know there's a target coming up for him, and this is it. And the reason why it's such a target for him is because he was actually supposed to run in the Grand Sefton back in the autumn. Unfortunately, he was a non-runner on the day due to picking up a little setback. But he really does look like a horse who's made from the national fences. And 7 of the last 10 winners have actually run in a 3-mile handicap chase during that season before winning the Topham. So I think you do need to stay as well, having a bit of a turn of foot. And 5 Star Getaway won 3 races over 2.5 miles last season. So he's definitely got that turn of foot. So he's going to get in at the foot of the weights. He's rated 133. I think he'd probably have to run out the handicap depending on if the top weight stays in or not. But either way, he's going to be at the foot of the weights, carrying nothing. I think he's got a cracking chance. Away from that, in the concluding race, the 2-mile conditional jockeys handicap hurdle, there's that Richmond Lake for Donald McCain. I think he's got a really good chance. He looks really well handicapped off a mark of 130. Obviously, there's no prices for that race. He might end up being too short for a bet. But his second behind John Bond at Haydock looks like a very, very nice piece of form. And then he fell at Kelso last time over 2 mile 2 furlong. And he was actually going really well right up until the 2 mile marker, basically. And then he started to get headed and fell one tired. So back to 2 miles for him on a flat track will be the ticket. And my main bet of the day would be Manila Crooner if he turns up in the Sefton. I think he's just a class above these. He obviously skipped Cheltenham due to injury. So he didn't get to run the Albert Bartlett. But Manila Kakuna, who beat him in the race at the Dublin Racer Festival last time, went and finished second in the Bartlett, so advertised that form quite nicely. And there's a couple of non-runners in the race, so if he does turn up, he'd be my best bet of the day.
Dan, I'll head to you. Anything else on the Friday?
Yeah, a few actually. To the Topham, and a horse I keep mentioning, and he never turns up. Commodore. Now he's number 45 in the National, which if they're bold, they'll wait for. But he seems unlikely to get in at this stage, which I always thought would be the case. And look, to be honest, I think if he runs in this race instead, he's tailor-made for it. Again, like Jake mentioned, like a lot of horses who come into this race have form over 3 miles or further. That's him as well, and he's a bold running type, and that is exactly what you need for this. He jumps extremely well. He's definitely the type you can just see going out in front and just absolutely relishing this test. Now, I don't think this looks a particularly strong renewal. I looked down the list and you could have huge question marks over form-wise or how suitable this test is for most, I'd say, that look like lining up. So considering he's 16-1 still, if he runs here, he will not be 16-1. Like he'd be that, I'd say, or nearabouts for the National. So he'll be shorter should he run here. So he would be a strong one if he goes. In the 2 mile handicap, the conditional amateurs event, Washington is a horse who's been held in quite high regard for some time. Pretty much all season, he seems to have been talked up, and I hope he should be better than a mile 127 in time. He was a dual bumper winner, made a taking hurdling debut, and then it just didn't go right for him thereafter in a couple of strong races at Cheltenham. He wasn't disgraced, but tactically things just didn't work out. And then he was only a couple of lengths behind Good Risk at All, who was running off 124 on his handicap debut, and he probably should have won that race. He made a terrible mess of the second last, and again at the last ended up being beaten a few lengths. But he kind of showed you he's off that kind of mark. He's a real threat. And Fergus Gregory had a spin on him the other day at Southwell, was pretty much with a view to this race. I have no doubt that's why he was on him. And I think this is the kind of race, a 2 mile handicap like this, big field, should suit him. Obviously, no idea on price because it's just not available at the minute. And then on to the Sefton. Yeah, I mean, Crooner is solid if he goes. Like the form of that Dublin Racing Festival race is actually working out far better than I thought it would. But another horse who had his form boosted was Giuliano Bello when Ballygriffin Cottage ran a stormer in the Albert Bartlett as well. And this race has always been the plan for him. They skipped Cheltenham purposely with a view to this, thinking Aintree would be the more appropriate test. Absolutely bolted up the last day against a very decent yardstick, who perhaps isn't an absolute tip-topper, but a pretty good horse. And Giuliano Bello just brushed him aside readily. And given that I think a few at the head of the market are doubtful runners, 10-1 seems way too big.
We'll move on now to the Mersey Novice Hurdle. This is quite a nice race, I think. We've got the likes of Walking on Air, Good Risk at All, Banbridge as well. So it's quite a strong field. Dan, I believe you have a strong fancy here.
Yeah, I think you named a couple there. I'm not sure if they're going to run. I mean, is Free Stripe Life, is he certain to run? I'd say maybe, but not a guarantee. Banbridge, Colonel Mustard, Good Risk at all of these are like 10-1 or shorter in the market. But the one we know has been aimed at this for a long time, they skipped Cheltenham because of his LS Bell, who I think you can still get 12-1 at the time of recording. And I think that's an absolutely cracking price. But they skipped Cheltenham, as I said, with a view to this. John Bon as well is taking up a chunk of the market. He's not going to run here. So it's just crying out for a bet at that price. And if you look back at some of her form now, it looks really, really impressive. Obviously, emphatic defeat of a horse with no name, who then finished second in the Mares Novice. That looks very strong, especially when you consider the third, won her next two, and is now rated 137. And then she was in 2 kind of middling races, one behind John Bon, where she wasn't disgraced, but there was just no pace, didn't suit her over 2 miles. And it was similar in the Sydney Banks again, where she did remarkably well to win, I thought, given the lack of pace and that she was held up, whereas the horse that finished a narrow second was up there with a pace throughout and had a very easy time of it too. And she only had £2 there instead of the usual 7 that theirs would get. So I think you can rate that performance higher still. And Skelton's record in this race is actually pretty impressive. Like, he won this with My Drogo last year. Before that, his 3 other runners all placed. And of the 6 mares to run in this race in the past 13 renewals, 4 of them have placed as well. So at 12-1, like, this is a mare we know is a very good one from her days in bumpers, as she's slowly been proving that over hurdles too. I think she's an absolutely cracking each way bet.
I would say Dan has stolen my thunder, but here's the thing. Dan is so much better at wording these arguments than I am. I'm all over LA Bow. I have been for the whole week. I think she is a banker at 12-1.
Banker, okay.
No, not banker, but it's definitely a strong selection for me. Most probably my nap of the whole week. Jake, I'll head over to you, and please tell me that you fancy LA Bow as well.
Yeah, so as Dan mentioned, there's a lot of either non-runners or runners that we just aren't sure where they're going to go because they're all multiple entered across the board. I think Free Strike Life is due to run, and I probably will back him if he's still around 3-1 on the day, just because I think that's a decent price for a horse who finished second in a Ballymore. And yeah, I think he's very solid. Walking on Air is interesting for Nicky Henderson, but he's kind of like the horse earlier in the week called El Fabiolo, where he's coming into this sort of one, decent win, and we really have no idea how good he could be. So it's hard to fancy him on that, especially as short as like 5-1. But yeah, I do agree that Ellis Bell has got a really good chance. That 12-1 at the minute is a great price. She reminds me a lot of Mamela, who came third in this race for Dan Skelton. And yeah, I think she's the case has already been laid out to you here by Dan. But yeah, she's got a really good each way chance.
The Liverpool Hurdle will be the race we look at before the Grand National. This sees the big rematch of the 1, 2, 4 from the Cheltenham Stales Hurdle. I personally went round and round in circles here, gentlemen, and I'm hoping one of you will have a strong opinion. I'll head over to you, Jake.
I don't have a strong opinion, but I do think that Florian Porter should be winning it if he turns up. I know he got a very good ride at Cheltenham, but I just think going back to the flatter track at Aintree, I don't see what's not going to suit him here. Obviously, I haven't heard anything to say that he is or isn't turning up, so that's probably your one doubt, and maybe that's why you can still get 15 to wait about the Stayers Hurdle winner to back up at Aintree. But I don't see why he couldn't just do the exact same thing again, go out in front under Danny Mullins, and the rest of them will be toiling to try and chase him. So I think, yeah, if he turns out, Florian Porter will win, but it's not a race that I'm excited to get involved in.
What odds do you think he'll be if he has to turn up on the day?
Well, I mean, at the minute he's around 7-4, 15 to wait. I guess if he turns up, then probably 6-4. It depends on how good the favourites are doing during the week, and Cheltenham runners as well. That'll probably be a big factor. If loads of Cheltenham runners are getting beaten before him, then he might potentially drift out. But yeah, around 6-4, 7-4 probably.
Dan, maybe it is going to pay just to keep it simple and go with the Stayers Hurdle winner, but maybe I've just been overcomplicating it this whole time. What about yourself? Shed some light on it for us.
I say I've not really heard much about his participation, and to be honest, this race is just so uninspiring. I don't get excited about this at all. The only wish I would have of it is, please, for the love of God, someone challenge him for the lead. Just give him a go for once, please. I can't deal with this again. Like, it was the softest lead you'll ever get in a race at Cheltenham in your life, and they know he can only be ridden one way, and they still let him do it. But I look down the list, and who's going to do it? Like, if Bobby tried to make all in the Coral, maybe he could do it, but would he? Would he want to? Like, I just really struggle with this race. I don't necessarily see how Champ or Time Hill can reverse the form if there's going to be no other pace angle in the race. It's not ideal making the running over hurdles at Aintree. It's not probably optimal, but in what's likely to be a small field, you'd probably get away with it. And I can definitely see him going off maybe like 11-10, 5-4 if he runs, because again, I think regardless of how the other Cheltenham runners are going, his main rivals here are all going to be run at Cheltenham as well. So it doesn't really concern me too much. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. Florian Porter I love the story of the horse and the lads, and that's great. But I just want to see something challenging for the lead in a proper race and see what happens.
Well, I'm really glad we managed to clear that up for anyone viewing who wanted in a lot of insight into the Liverpool Hurdle.
Hey, Willow, you just gave people a 12-1 banker like 2 minutes ago. So, like, I mean, exactly. If they want decisive, outrageous opinions, you've already delivered on that front. So, we can have a race to sit on the fence. Okay, like, just give us one.
It's fine. It's fine. I teed us all up to sit on the fence there. All right, we'll move on to the Grand National, the highlight, the showcase of the whole meeting. And I haven't had a look at the race, boys. I'm really sorry. The Grand National is not the race that I enjoy personally. Watching a horse slog around 4 miles, it's not a betting race. I don't think I've ever won it. So I just sort of skim over, just skim over the top of it. And I'll head to you, Dan, for the Grand National winner.
Yeah. So look, last year I was all over Any Second Now. I thought he had a cracking chance of the race, but I think his chances might have gone this time now. He's a 10-year-old from a £7 higher mark. So I was looking for someone a bit younger, maybe a bit fresh to the scene. And I ended up going down with my main bet as Longhouse Poet. Now, he landed the gamble in the Fiestas, and you watch that race back, he always looked the winner. Like, if you were on him at fancy prices earlier in the week before the gamble, you were sitting pretty throughout that entire race. And the margin of victory wasn't massive, but he always looked in control. And that wasn't really out of the blue when you look back through what he's achieved. He beat Monkfish in a bumper. He was third in a couple of Grade 1 Novice hurdles. Then in his Novice Chase campaign, he was second to Janadil, which looks half decent now, and he beat Ron Wild Fred. So he had a decent level of form before an injury ended his Novice career. And he's had kind of that old school prep for a national. Like, he won the Fiestas, then he went back over hurdles, which Connections also did with number 6 Valverde before he won the national back in 2006. So he's an 8-year-old who's a very sound jumper. He's only had 6 starts over fences, but he's had enough big field experience for that not to worry me. In fact, I like it more because he's still in that realm of being unexposed, but with a bit of experience. So I think he'll cope with this test. And considering he's still around the 16-1 mark in most places, I think that's a very fair bet. And perhaps a bigger price, who I think is just probably one of the more interesting runners, is Court Maid. You get 66-1 about her. And I know mares in the national don't exactly have a glamoring history, but I think she's got an interesting profile. It's the first start for Henry de Bromhead. Now, 18 months ago, she put in a monstrous performance to win the Porterstown by 13 lengths, eased down off a mark 140. Now, she's not been at that level since, but she's been campaigned rather strangely. I think she was turned out near enough like 10 days later to run at Cheltenham, where she was punted off the boards and didn't quite back it up. Understandable after such a monstrous effort last time. Then she ran pretty well in the Irish National off a 4-month break. That was never going to be ideal to come off that absence after in a race like that. And then this season, she didn't make a reappearance till the turn of the year, where she was behind Ellie May and Mount Ida. A bit disappointing, but it was the first run of the season, so you forgive it. Then she was sent over hurdles for the Galmoy, and then she was back over 2 miles behind Ellie May in the Opera Hat, which is clearly an inadequate trip for her. It just strikes me again as one of those classic, let's kind of keep concealed what we have and aim for the national type preparations. And obviously, Henry won the race last year. It's going to be her first run for him. She had enough class to win over the minimum triple, run quite well in decent competition, as well as bolt up in a competitive staying chase like the Porterstown. And she hasn't really had another shot at a big staying chase like that under fair conditions. Like, she went to the Irish National, but it's off a 4-month break. Whereas now, I think she's been clearly put away with this race in mind. And it's 66-1. Like, I think you'd struggle to find a more interesting runner at the prices.
I want to pose this question. I'll bring it to you, Jake, as well. We did have one about Delta Work. How do we reckon he'll run? It's only been a 24-day turnaround between this and his run of the cross country. It was on soft ground. The guy who posed the question said that must have taken something out of him, and surely he's a horse to take on at 8-1. Is he a horse you just completely scratched off your list, or was there any reason behind it?
No, look, it's a national. I mean, you can't back them all. I mean, you kind of have to you take courses on their merits and think, okay, well, he's probably short enough for me, which is probably where I fell with Delta Work. I mean, he won that fairly cozily in the end. I don't think he was necessarily like legless after that race. I mean, you can see he kind of was pricking his ears at the end. I think he had enough left, and we know this is a Grade 1 horse from back in his pomp. So I'm not sure if the angle of him being exhausted after Cheltenham would be the reason I'd take him on. But more the fact that maybe, again, he's been around long enough. He's not perhaps as sprightly as he used to be, and he's running off quite a large weight. And it's not exactly an easy task to back it up. Tiger Roll's a freak, remember. There aren't many horses like Tiger Roll. And for as much as Delta Work is probably the classier of the two, does he have the constitution to be able to do it in a national so quickly afterwards? That would be a question mark. And again, I think a lot at the front of the market in the 8-10-1 category, I think you can pose a question or two of, hence why I looked elsewhere.
Jake, I'll chuck that question straight to you as well, but also your selection straight afterwards.
Yeah, so I'll go through a couple of the front of the market, actually, starting off with Delta Work. And obviously, it was a great performance in the cross country. But I think the fact that he now has to carry 11:09 due to Chris's Dream coming out, that really does put me off. He's basically got top weight. And for all that, he looks like a very good horse over the cross country fences, which obviously worked well for Tiger Roll. I just don't know about him in a handicap. As you said, 24 days. It's quick enough, but I don't think it took too much out of him. I think he'll run his race. It's just the prices. I think I'm happy to leave it. Snow Leopardess is another one that I think this one more than Delta Work, I don't really get the price, to be honest. It would be a fantastic story, don't get me wrong. She's a very likable mare, but she just absolutely scrambled home to win the Beach over 3 mile 2 off a mark of 140. She's now £6 higher. She's a 10-year-old. She's grey and she's a mare. I mean, that's all the trend just gone in a row. But yeah, I'm not sure that she quite warrants to be where she is in the market. Some interesting ones at Eccles Surf. Obviously, there's been a bit of hype around him recently. If he gets into the race, I think he'll have a solid chance. Although I do think he'll probably want some rain. Obviously, the piece of form that everyone's picking up on is he was second behind Win My Wings at Newcastle, and she's gone up. I think it's £14 for a mark of 154 today. So obviously he's quite well in on that piece of form. Then there's also Run Wild Fred, who's going to be running. And I thought he'd actually be a really interesting runner under Davy Russell. But then I saw he only gets £2 from Delta Work, and that just really put me off him, to be honest. I thought it'd be, if he was getting about £5 or £6, then I'd probably put him up. But only getting the 2, I don't know, that's quite a tough weight to carry, isn't it? But the one I do like is Ascaria 10. He would probably be my main selection at this stage. He ran a cracker in the National Hunt Chase last season, won 3rd behind Galvin, who obviously had a cracking season this year. And then this season, it's all been about getting to the National. And that was indicated by entries where he had an early entry in the Beecher handicap chase here at Aintree. He didn't take out that engagement. I think there must have been a bit of a hold up because he didn't start a season until January, which I think is a real positive because he's only coming into this race, having had 2 runs this season, which I think is a really good positive. Obviously, he was 8th in that Fiestes off a mark of 151 behind Longhouse Pert, which is also definitely respect for the race. And then he was last seen running in the Bobby Joe chase at Ferry House. So that's a conditions grade 3. I actually quite like it as a trial for the National. And he was only beaten a nose by Any Second Now that day. He'll be £1 worse off with that rival. He's only getting £7 this time rather than the £8 he got last time. But I think that this marathon trip will bring out the best in him. If he jumps around, I think he's got a really good chance. And yeah, like he's just carrying a nice weight, 11 stone 1. That's very manageable off a mark of 152. I think he's got, a proper chance. Yeah, and obviously you can make a case for most of these either way of, either not being able to get home at all or having a good chance for the race. That's just a National for you. But that was Ascaria 10 is probably the one that I'm leaning towards at the moment.
Well, that's just about going to wrap up our Aintree preview. If I do come back and do a Punchestown preview for these guys, just know that I am being held at gunpoint and I did not consent to it. So please call for help. Dan, how confident are you going into Aintree?
I don't know. It's one of those where I think you'll kind of get a gauge on how much Cheltenham has taken out a few horses fairly early on, and maybe you can see after there. But there are a few I like at decent prices, and I think I'm in some decent positions. Like the likes of Giulio Bello, I think is a good price at the minute at 10 to 1. LA Bell at 12 to 1. I think you can get a few of those on board. Like we're going into the week in a decent position. But when it comes to the National, you can never be too confident, can you? You could watch 40 different previews and come out with 40 different selections almost at a time. Like it's one of those races where I think almost sometimes it pays not to look too deep into it just because it's information overload and sometimes just enjoy it for the spectacle. But it's a kind of a nice crescendo to the jump season. I think for the last couple of weeks I've been a bit burnt out, but looking at this I felt a bit reinvigorated again as we approach the end. So it was it's been fun to talk about it again after our small hiatus.
Yeah, it was definitely felt a little bit rusty coming back into it. And Jake, how about yourself? How confident are you feeling going into this as well?
I think a lot of my week is going to boil down to whether Gordon Elliott bounces back to form, to be honest. I've backed quite a lot of his horses, but just because I think that over the last couple of weeks where people have been saying about his form, he's only had like 1 winner in 20 runs or whatever it is. He obviously hasn't run the caliber of horse that he's run at Cheltenham. Obviously, it's disappointing at Cheltenham. Hopefully, these horses can now bounce back at Aintree, and that may define my week. But like Dan said, if you can get on a couple of decent anti-poach prices, then you get the value and hopefully see 1 or 2 of them come in on the day.
It's that sort of Nicky Henderson style thing before Cheltenham, isn't it? He had like a bit of a slump, and then we just came to the conclusion that he was just running really bad horses, saving them all for Cheltenham. As you say, if you want to get a price about anyone, it's LA Bell. That is your winner for the week. Anyway, guys, that is going to wrap it up this time, and we will see you again very shortly.